Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
Welcome to the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, bringing you practical, timely, and accurate insights so that you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, October 27th, episode 203. Today, ignorance is not bliss. What you need to know to avoid massive fines, unneeded scrutiny, and trending poorly in the public's eye. Plus, as news of another active shooter incident reverberates throughout our community, we are reminded to prepare for the unexpected. And we present you with the most horrifying costumes in HR this Halloween. As always, we welcome your thoughts and take your questions. All this and more on This Week at Work.
Great to have you all with us once again today. As always, Burt Garland is back in the house with us. Burt, we're happy to have you back from I guess you were on a program last week, or you were in court last week. I'm not sure exactly what you're doing, maybe something union free, but either way, I'm happy to have you back. I do want to just acknowledge before we kick off the program, just to share my sympathy to all those suffering and affected by the school shooting that took place in the city of St. Louis earlier in the week. I mean, these events are just horrific, and unfortunately, this type of tragedy can happen any place at any time. And it makes me reflect just how important the role is all of us play when we're at work or we're at home. But particularly the listeners of this program carry maybe a duty that we all didn't sign up for. And that is, the vigilance, ensuring we have proper benefits, training, creating a culture, inclusion, openness, a place for people to go if they are suffering from any mental illness in this space. And that wasn't something we worried about at work when I started in the workplace in the early 90s, like we do today. And I just want to share that. I know it's a tough job, and I know some of us are suffering as we live through this tragedy that sits real close to home for us here in the city of St. Louis or in the Midwest. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but it's just something that we know it's tough. And if there's a way that AIM can support you or Ogletree can support you, and we all have resources to do that, please don't ever be afraid to reach out, and let's do all we can to put an end to this type of thing so people stop suffering from these types of unnecessary events. With us today is Tom Chibnall. We are going to call him Chibs going forward. That is a reference that he has had back in his day when he was a younger man. And today when I called him Chibs, he got a good chuckle from that. So Chibs, welcome to the program today.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're happy to have you back. It's coincidence that we had you lined up for the program today, and we can talk a little bit about the event here in St. Louis and what our responsibilities are under OSHA as it relates to active shooter and training. We do have, a question that has come in. I do want to address that question. We'll get back to that in a little bit. Burt, I know you also have a busy week tomorrow, or busy day tomorrow to end the week. As it relates to a program that your firm is having. It may already be sold out. I'm not even sure if people can still register, but I know it's in high demand. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Tomorrow is our full day managing a workplace seminar, or as we abbreviate it within the office, our MAW seminar. And we have not been live really for the past couple of years due to COVID. And this year we are full-fledged live and in person. And we've got a packed seminar tomorrow full of all kinds of great information for the people who will be attending. I know we were well over 300 people who are registered to attend. It is at the Four Seasons tomorrow. I'm not sure what their capacity is, but I think we were getting we're either over or nearly at capacity. So one of those two, but the information about that can be found on our firm's website. And Phil, you're gonna play a special guest role on the during our program tomorrow and during one of my main sessions, right?
Yeah, it is. I think we're kicking off early tomorrow morning, right around 9 o'clock, you and I during one of the main session. And I wasn't sure if that was going to help your attendance or hurt your attendance. We have to be careful with those types of invites, Bert, but I'm looking forward to it. And I think just a ton of your firm, the work that you do, the work that Tom does, and all the other resources from Ogletree and the way that you've made that firm available to our members, and on behalf of all of them, thank you very much for that. And I know it's going to be a great event. As always, you guys do things first class. Appreciate that.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. So let's get on with the program. We have a poll question as always for you. And here is the question. We'd love to get not just your response, but some comments on it. And the question is, what is the biggest factor to encourage safe workplaces? Now, that seems like an obvious answer, and particularly I have a background in safety and practice safety as a professional for several years in the early 90s. And then for most of my career, I've had a responsibility for safety where the safety department, environmental department, and others reported up through me. So here are responses, and I was looking at these responses, and I'm not sure if I really give it some thought how I would answer it. But they're just not as obvious as you might think. So your choices are OSHA oversight, desire to avoid negative publicity, cost of injuries, safety-minded leadership, and culture. And when I read that one, I was like, but why is there a safety-minded leadership and culture? What's the purpose of that? And then good relationships with lawyers like Tom and Bert, or other, and then we'd like to have your comments if it's other. And once again, we don't like the all of above. That makes it too easy and too obvious. So let's get your comments, and that will help start the conversation here. All right. So as we get going, and before we go any further, let's get to Lawyer on the Clock, your complimentary 6 minutes of legal news, all from you. Bert and Melissa did a great job last week. We're happy to have her on the program. But once again, we're glad that you're back. So with that, let's kick off Lawyer on the Clock.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
All right. Thank you, announcer from above. So the first one I want to talk about is the EEOC just in the last few days issued a new poster requirement for know your rights. Workplace discrimination is illegal. Hopefully that's up there on the screen for everybody to see. This is a new poster that's free of charge, able to be downloaded from the EEOC's website. And the primary differences in this chart and the prior charts that the EEOC had in place is that this one makes clear that some of the newer classifications to be recognized in recent years, which include sexual orientation and gender identity, are also protected classifications. There's also more information about how to contact the EEOC if you believe you are a victim of discrimination in the workplace or think you might be a victim of discrimination in the workplace. So this is one, there is no deadline for posting this yet, but I would suggest that employers probably post this. What this really means is that you need to go to the EEOC's website, pull this off and post it probably sooner rather than later. What of course this also means that if you are one of those many employers who use like a federal 5-in-1 or 6-in-1 or 7-in-1 and 8-in-1 poster for rights in the workplace, you are going to need to update your posters eventually. Phil, is that something you guys help them with?
Yeah, it is. We do, Bert, actually, and a very large percent of our member base is just on an auto enroll program where we just cover these things for them. They don't have to think about it. We send it to them when they need to be updated and that things change for them, whether it's, federally or through their state. And if you're not involved in that program, just make it easy on yourself, sign up for it, and we'll make sure to get all those updates to you. Contact your AIM advisor for that.
All right. So anyway, the next one is, yes, we are just less than a couple weeks away from everybody's favorite time of the year, a day of national unity. I say that tongue in cheek, of course, but we are just a few days away from the midterm elections, and I thought it would be important to remind all of our viewers that most states, including here in Missouri, have voting laws that allow or require the employer to provide time off to the employees to vote. So Nick, I think you were going to be able to put up the voting leave map that I had sent you. This is a complimentary map that you can register to get from Ogletree Deakins. It's an interactive map. And what this map shows is that everybody, it shows all the states in yellow there that have voting laws where you need to provide paid time off, or in most cases, paid time off from work, like here in Missouri. You need to provide paid time off from work for employees to go vote if they do not have a 3-hour block during the day, during the time the polls are open, in which to go vote. So if they don't have that 3-hour window because of work, then you as the employer have got to provide the paid time off. So you could see up there that there's just a handful of states that do not have voting laws in place. So for our viewers on the program, Missouri and Illinois do have these voting laws in place. Indiana does not have these voting laws in place. Now, interestingly, according to a recent Bloomberg Law article, actually very recent from yesterday, they talked about the fact that most states have these laws, but in the states that these laws do not exist, that basically in those states, employers are starting to really pick up the slack and providing employees the opportunity to go vote on election day as part of their civic duty. So,
well, they should do that. It's a national day of unity, kumbaya, and I think that's a good thing for us. Let's get out and vote, regardless of what position you vote on. Go let your voice be heard. That is the unity, is the fact that we're voting. So great for that, Bert. Let's keep you moving. How about the independent contractor rule? Yeah, the last one I think we'll have time to cover today, as I mentioned before on the program, that the Department of Labor is looking to reverse the Trump era on independent contractors and return to a much more similar independent contractor rule that the Obama administration had been pushing. And what this is really going to do, it's going to impact the gig economy. Now, before we jump into a little banter on that, Phil, I just want to remind the viewers that the Department of Labor had issued a notice of proposed rulemaking and had originally set a November 28, 2022 deadline for the public to submit comments regarding the proposed rule. In response to complaints from many business groups and others about the 45-day comment period, that it was too short, the DOL extended that comment deadline by an additional 15 days until December 13, 2022, to give employers, business groups more opportunity to comment to the DOL on this new independent contractor rule. And just by way of very, very quick summary, the biggest changes in these rules, it's going to make it much harder for people to be classified as independent contractors, and much more likely that they're going to be employees. And this rule is specifically targeted at the gig economy, which is, the Ubers, the Lyfts, Uber Eats, DoorDash, anything that's in that gig economy that we have really gotten used to as a convenience, and also as in many cases a cheaper, less expensive form of service that we as consumers have gotten used to. This rule is targeted at that sector of the economy to make them employees, which of course in the end is going to hit the consumers in the pocketbook. Yeah, no, I'd love to have some comments and opinions on that. I have my own opinion. I like the idea that people can be independent contractors and work for themselves, and I don't feel like in every case you should have to be an employee of a corporation like Uber in order to work for them, and the oversight is minimal. But I also understand the other side of that, which is, benefits and stability and some other things that come along with being an employer. This will affect employers, but Bert, does it have any impact from what you can see on the way that many of our employers use temporary work agencies.
Yeah, so those temporary work agencies, you're really talking more about along the lines of joint employment. And while this specific rule is targeted at independent contractors versus joint employer, it does give you a very good preview of what's coming down the road next regarding joint employment. This administration is absolutely focused through its administrative agencies on doing away with that distinction when employer A retains a staffing agency to staff part of its operations. This administration is dead set on making sure that that would be considered a joint employer relationship, which has implications, of course, not just from taxing perspective, but it has FMLA implications, has wage and hour implications, and very importantly, has union organizing implications that if these employees are organized, both employers could be pulled into the organizing campaign.
Yep, got it. All right, there you have it. That's Lawyer on the Clock. Great job, Bert. There's some important things. I like the National Day of Unity. I agree with that. We are divided unitedly. There is no doubt. Okay, let's move on to the next section here, which is called Philburt's Forum. It is Halloween time. Nick, let's introduce Philburt's Forum.
You've just entered Philburt's Forum, where we peel the onion back and take a lighter look at the workplace.
When we're looking at Philburt's Forum, this funny section to me, Bert, I like this part of the program because we get to be a little bit light and poke fun at things. And I don't know about you, but we have the invisible employee costume. One of my favorite costumes for this year during Halloween. I've been seeing this costume all throughout the COVID pandemic when people show up on the computer screen and it's just a blank screen and I'm talking to a blank screen and it's an invisible employee. There is a voice in the sky. I hear the person might be participating, but that's always an interesting costume. I think we're going to see that quite a bit as this year goes on, not just on Halloween. The interesting part of that invisible costume is sometimes you have the invisible costume is disguised as a video roll, right? So some people have recorded themselves and they're playing a loop video so that you think the person's there nodding their head, moving about, having some action, but in the reality, they're not there. They're watching something else, doing something else. And it's the cleverness of costumes like that that are great for me to observe during Halloween, workplace costumes. Any that come to mind for you, Bert?
No, nothing in particular, Phil, other than just to throw out a comment there that I have yet to encounter an employer contacting me about an employee who's just playing a loop video while they're supposed to be on a Zoom or a Teams meeting.
That's because they haven't been caught.
Well, I don't know that they haven't been caught, but I think the employers know very well what to do with that, and they don't need the advice of their legal counsel in that situation.
Yeah, I'm watching Chibs right now, and he's in the background bobbing his head, and I'm not sure if he's really there or not, you know. All right, let's get moving on to the main topic. Nick, can we take a look at the survey results? And we're going to start with the kickoff of those results, and we're going to invite Chibs into the conversation here and get going on the main topic, which is really all about OSHA today and some of the important things that are happening there. So let's look at the survey results real quick.
Step into the Employer's Lounge, a safe place to talk about the workplace.
All right, looks like safety-minded leadership and culture. I kind of suspected this one might lead the way. And I guess when I thought about that question, I thought a little deeper because having sat in numerous safety meetings, it's like, why is someone safety-minded in leadership from a culture standpoint? And I can tell you, you know, when OSHA took place in 1970 or 72, something like that, you know, there was a lot of reluctance. It was a new law. We had to comply with it. It wasn't something that was welcomed into industry with open arms, much like many other new legislations that we see that we have to comply with. And today people go, oh, well, it's safety-minded leadership and culture. But I'm not sure it's really not because we have to comply with it more so than any other reason. I'd like to believe that's the answer. And then people just are worried about the well-being of others. But I had too much experience to know that when I would point something out or when we would bring hazardous conditions and you try to interrupt production to correct that problem, that safety-minded leadership and culture gets challenged. And it's just quite interesting because you don't challenge safety-minded leadership and culture straight from the beginning if that truly is the core reason. So I just question that in my mind a little bit. I like the answer. I think it's the answer I would have gave. But if you peel that onion back a little bit and say, but why, you might add more comments and love to have them in the chat section of the program. Tom, any thoughts from you as you take a look at those survey results?
Yeah, Phil, it's funny you mentioned that. A lot of people I've encountered don't really pay much attention to the safety issue until production stops. It's a big hit. And, as corporations want to keep producing things, it's hard to take a break from that, particularly if you got to fix a problem that could have been avoided in a much easier way than shutting down production.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the last thing you ever want to do. I've only had to be involved in doing that a few times in my career, but I know when that has happened, it wasn't like, you know what, thank you. This is the right thing for us to do for our business. And, let me give you a high five. And you stood up and that was all the right thing. I mean, everything came crashing down at that moment, and maybe rightfully so. I'm not, again, saying that that's not right. I'm just saying it makes a challenge here for me. We are getting some comments rolling in. I'm going to get to those, but Tom, I want to kick off while I read those to you. We had a question from Megan, and her question is, does OSHA have a policy or inspect for active shooter preparedness? I think that's just a timely question considering recent local events.
Yeah, it is a timely question, Phil. Somewhat ironically, no. So there's no regulation that OSHA has that really governs active shooters or even workplace violence for that matter. And I say that it's ironic considering that, that might be the most prominent safety issue in the current public sphere. But yet, OSHA still polices it, just there's no specific standard like you have for, maybe like lockout, tag out, or personal protective equipment. It's just all covered under OSHA's general duty clause, which essentially says that an employer has to provide a workplace that's free of known hazards. OSHA does offer guidance on, guidance and training modules. It encourages the active shooter training process. And it's not something that they necessarily look for, but it may be something that is inquired about when you look at emergency action plans or sort of emergency preparedness solutions. So it's not necessarily something that you might get hit with a particular citation for under a particular standard, but it's certainly something on OSHA's mind, and certainly something that they're aware of. Their recourse to address it is a little bit more limited, say, than some other poignant safety issues that they're looking at.
Yeah, and have you had any scenarios where active shooter or any other form of emergency response programs that are important to have in the workplace, some covered under procedure, some more under general duty, really get to be sticky with OSHA fines that you've been involved in?
So far, no, thankfully.
Thank goodness.
Right, I can count on maybe one hand. Maybe two fingers on one hand, the number of times that I've had a shooting incident in a workplace. And I hope that that occurrence doesn't go up. But I can tell you that what OSHA looks for, in those regards is, oftentimes, what kind of plans did you have in place? Was it addressed? Did you have an emergency evacuation plan? Much like we'd have for, maybe a natural disaster of some sort, or a fire. These are things that they'll look at, and they'll cross that border a little bit by saying, well, if you have this, emergency exit plan and preparedness plan in place, it can apply to the active shooter. Now, we know that an active shooter is far different than a fire, far different than maybe a flood or anything like that. So there are differences, but one of the things that OSHA will look for is if you got something in place to address that, or at least to have your employees prepared to address it, hopefully that never happens, but the idea is that you got something in place to at least navigate your employees.
Yeah, and I'm just reading some of the comments here, and I'm seeing Ginger and Dave are making similar comments around the cost of injury goes way beyond the cost of workers' comp, affecting culture and vision and employee relationships and so on. I couldn't agree with them more. It is all about culture and our ability to do the right things. Michelle goes on to say culture. Kim's given a big thank you for all you do. Bert, she must be referring to you. You're the smiling face of the program and the knowledge base. We appreciate that. Tom, when we are looking at now OSHA is seeking to make injury and illness records public with some massive fines. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no problem. So this is also sort of timely in terms of politics, because as we all know,
Our National Day of Unity.
That's right. As we all know, that these government agencies are very political creatures in nature, even though that they're intended not to be. So what we saw, and I'm going to take us back in time a little bit back to the Obama administration, and during that period of time, OSHA made a real concerted effort to push the idea of making publicly available employers what are called their OSHA 300 and 300A logs, their record keeping logs, telling you how many recordable injuries and illnesses you had. And the idea behind it, I don't think that the government would ever come out and say this directly, but I think the idea behind it was to publicly shame employers, and in doing so to sort of spur activity in the safety realm, to make people a little bit more cognizant of their safety record and make them safer. Well, that never made it through, and probably for good reason. And the Biden administration has sort of resurrected that, and OSHA's tried to push that through. Much like Bert was talking about with the independent contractor rule, these agencies have to go through a formal rulemaking process, and OSHA has started that process, and it doesn't look promising for a couple of reasons. One, the OSHA is trying to lower the sort of threshold level of employees that would trigger this reporting. And they're trying to make it go from 250 to 100. So if you had 100 employees, then you'd have to submit your logs to the government, and they'd be available via a sort of open public portal. That doesn't look like it's going to happen. And that public sort of ignominy portion of it has really sort of driven the response against that. Currently, employers with 250 or more, they have to submit their OSHA logs to the government every year, but those aren't made public. And I think it's really that was the big debate recently within the safety workplaces. What happens if this goes through, and it has not gone through, and it doesn't look like it will. So I think we can breathe a little bit clearer there. But the idea is that these records, your record keeping responsibilities, are essential, and there's something that OSHA absolutely looks at. It's one of the first things they ask for, and it's one of the very few things that you are obligated to provide an OSHA inspector when that inspector comes out onto your facility. Go ahead, Phil. Yes, sir.
So Chibs, with that, when you are working in this scenario and you get called from an employer, there's an OSHA inspector, how often are those records, do you find, more accurate versus more incomplete? And there's some management needed there.
Yeah, I would say, unfortunately, I wouldn't say more often than not, but enough times to make me as a OSHA lawyer feel uncomfortable that they're not accurate. And to be quite honest, Phil, it's not the sexiest portion of the OSHA workplace, of the OSHA standard. It's really administrative, and it can be overlooked. There are very specific regulations that deal with this. The OSHA inspector will, like I said, these are the first things that they ask for. And, many employers aren't aware of this, but there is a standard that says if you get asked for your OSHA 300 logs, your 300A, your 300, you have 4 hours from the moment that you get requested to turn those over.
Yeah.
That's not a lot, but fortunately, that's where knowing your rights, knowing your the way the system works, and also knowing people like Bert and myself, you can negotiate that with the compliance officer. Very rarely do I see an employee get cited for not turning over those records, but that just goes to show that there's standards in that act and standards in the regulations that really are time sensitive, that employers should definitely be aware of.
All right, there you go, folks. You've heard it directly from Tom Chibnall. Chibs, our OSHA expert. We're happy to have him. If you need help with that OSHA log or anything else, and you're dealing with some challenges there, reach out to Tom. I know he does a great job helping our members, and maybe you're already working with him and getting some guidance. And between AIM and Ogletree, I think you'll be well covered in that space of workplace safety. So thank you for that, Tom. We appreciate it. Next week, we are going to have a great discussion around recession planning with Michael Macakovich. Mikey Mac will be back on the program. I'm getting all kinds of questions around what kind of pay increase should we do now? We've seen inflation rates as high as they've been, and pay raises have kind of been going through the roof, but do I need to do anything knowing that there's a recession? I think that answer is going to be absolutely, but you'll need to join next week to hear what Mikey Mac has to say about it. And we will see you next week on This Week at Work. Bye-bye.